All right, guys, welcome back to Small Chaser's channel. Hope you're doing well. We're going to cover today the Upper Potomac watershed and a couple kind of nuances about the Potomac River. I always get a lot of messages this time of year because there are a lot of tournaments on the Potomac River, the Upper Potomac, as well as the Tidal Potomac. But we're going to focus on the Upper Potomac and some things that can help you out. And this isn't just for this is really more for recreational anglers, but using the data and the metrics from tournament angling to help you dial in where you're going to go to fish, okay? There is a big difference. I get into these discussions a lot. There's a big difference between tournament anglers and river rats, okay, who don't fish tournaments but who primarily fish river systems, especially throughout our region. When we're talking about smallmouth, we've got 4 or 5 of the best smallmouth rivers in the country, okay? So you can apply what we're going to talk about today to any river system. You can use the same tools and the same kind of homework that you should be doing that I know a lot of anglers, especially tournament anglers, aren't doing. And that's why they're leaving a lot of catches off the board, in my opinion. So when we're talking about the Potomac River, let me give you a little bit of context on my background with the Potomac River. I moved up to the watershed, returned back to the watershed in 2019, so right before COVID. So I've had basically 7 years to break down this river, all right? On the river 3-4 times a week, all right? And 5 times a week during COVID, okay? And so I've had a lot of experience on various river systems like the Shenandoah, and to a lesser extent the Juniata and the Susquehanna, but just primarily the Potomac River is my home river. I am 10 minutes from the river. I can be on any number of launches or accesses in 10 to 15 minutes. So that's critical when I want to determine where I'm going to go out fishing today, right? So I'm going to go out fishing today. What am I going to look at? Or you're coming into coming to the Potomac River or any river, and you're going to be fishing a tournament for the first time, brand new river for the first time. What are you really looking at? Now, a lot of people will tell you they go to YouTube, they look for videos to find out where other people were fishing. That's a mistake, okay? Because everybody edits, everybody does everything, on their videos, knowing that people do that, right? And a lot of times, while that may give you a little bit, that really is a snapshot of that particular day. And those conditions likely are not the same. They could be. But just because, we're going to talk about today, just because you fished June of 2024 on the Potomac River or 2025 on the Potomac River doesn't mean it's going to set up in June 2026. Okay? This river constantly is in flux, like every other river in the country. It is constantly changing. The conditions are constantly different. Every weekend you want to go out fishing. So what do you look at? Do you look at podcasts? Do you look at YouTube videos that are just showing guys fishing, but aren't really explaining to you what the conditions are while they're out there? I really wish a lot more of them would do that, but the problem is a lot of the content on social media for kayak fishing, for example, is predicated on tournament angling. And tournament anglers, they are very, very protective of what they would call the juice, right? They don't want to talk about salinity. They don't want to talk about water temperature. They don't want to talk about water clarity. They don't want to talk about depth and its relationship, like we're going to talk about today, to turbidity. They don't want to talk about those things. Some of them can't talk about those things, okay, because they don't have that depth. They don't really understand it. Case in point, okay, I showed up at a ramp one time in the last 7 years. There was a tournament going on. I was not into kayak tournament fishing. I just kind of returned to the region. I grew up now in Loudoun County. That's where I was born. Loudoun County is where I grew up. The ranger for Algonquin Park lived in my neighborhood, okay? I constantly was at Algonquin Park in Loudoun County growing up, okay? I grew up on this river, all right, more or less. I learned how to fish on this river. So some people say a lot of things, especially about me personally, and I just kind of chuckle because I grew up fishing with spinning gear, canoeing, and all those things, wade fishing and all those things on the Potomac River and Goose Creek. Okay, and to a lesser extent the Shenandoah, because I was a little further away from me. But I left Loudon, right? Moved down to the James River, went to college, went in the military, and then got married and had kids and moved back. Okay, moved back. All right, and it's amazing how the river has changed in a number of ways since some of the big time flooding. I returned the year after those major floods of 2018, okay? And it devastated the fishery compared to what I remember the fishery being really growing up until I was about 12, 13 years old is when I moved away. And so a lot of the things I learned from the ranger and from my mom was a Girl Scout troop leader. I mean, she would always explain to me, they would always do stuff at Algonquin Park. I always tagged along. They always did stuff in the water, the fish species, catching all the forage, and all that stuff comes back to a lot of stuff I talk about in my videos because it's been ingrained in my DNA, the biology of the river. And I talk a lot about that, and a lot of guys cannot talk about that because they just don't have that depth of knowledge, like in terms of understanding the various fish species that make up the forage base of the Upper Potomac watershed. Right? They don't understand that the Piedmont section, which is primarily where I am, is completely different than the true Upper Potomac River. Okay? Upper Potomac. I'm talking Paw Paw, Hancock. The rivers are completely different. They are night and day different rivers. And when you get into the branches, they're completely different river systems than the Potomac section of, say, Dam 4 all the way down to DC. Okay? Different terrain, different topography, different water clarity and content, different substrate. All these things are different. And what a lot of people find is a lot of times tournament angling will do a disservice to non-tournament angling's perception of river systems because they look at those tournaments and they see like all the inches that are caught or the weights or the bags or the limits, but they don't realize that that's a snapshot of a section of which boundaries have been established. And when tournament trails do not expand their boundaries or do not change their boundaries up based on late winter, early spring, mid-spring, summer, and fall, you get a kind of mistabulation of reality, right? And we're gonna break that down with one tournament trail specific to one section of the Piedmont Potomac River today, where I'm going to show you why so many people are calling me and texting me, asking me what the heck is wrong with the Potomac River this year. Because the barometer is, A, people want to know where to fish, and B, there's been a significant drop-off this year in fishing the Potomac River. And that's true. There has. I'm out almost every, 2-3 times a week. There's significant. This has been the toughest. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This has been the toughest season for smallmouth in terms of spring. We're talking about April, May, June. Okay, early June right now. In the 7 years I've been here, this has been the toughest. Anybody who knows me, friends, circle, it's tough. It's tough. Okay. Why is that? Right? Well, you have to remember that when you're talking about a river system, you have to address the things that are impacting a river system. We just had one of the longest periods winter cold snaps in the last decade hit the river system. We had snow on the ground that stayed on the ground over 14 days, actually 16 days. What I mean by that is snow fell 16 days prior and didn't melt. Okay? It stayed on the ground along the river for 16 days. And of course, we got more snow after that, two more times. So we had an extended winter cold snap this year compared to previous years. Okay? For example, last year. Okay? And I will point out, last year set up April, June perfectly for tournament fishing. This year, not so much. Why? Everything has been delayed. Everything has been delayed. We've had more snaps of cold weather And what I mean by cold weather, I don't mean winter. I mean in spring, we've had more snapbacks, meaning we've gone from 86 degrees to 48 degrees. We've gone from 75 degrees during the day to 41 degrees overnight temperature. All of these things impact everything. It impacts the balance of your river system. But nothing is more important than one thing. And one thing, it's the one thing that most people that you talk to don't ever talk about. Like, they don't understand it, okay? And that's turbidity. They don't understand. They don't use turbidity as a mechanism to determine where they should fish. They use the boundaries of, like, say, tournaments, and then they look to see, oh, well, you know, like, name places, right, that people talk about. Well, I'll just go there because somebody in a tournament got whatever. They don't look at, like, the actual aromatic temperatures, the barometric temperatures, the water levels, the turbidity. I would argue turbidity is more important than depth. But people focus on, well, what's the depth? That is logical because a lot of people who fish in these tournaments are in kayaks. It doesn't really matter as much for guys in boats when there's boating tournaments. There's not as many boating tournaments as there are kayak tournaments. So if you're in a kayak, you do want to be concerned about whether or not I'm going to be dog walking my kayak or wade fishing. What's is the river down or up? But down or up is relative, okay, to turbidity, because it really doesn't matter, okay. So like today, for example, this is where we're sitting at today. If you just take the watershed in a snapshot, it's 80 degrees in Potomac with 10 mile an hour winds. It's 81 degrees at Point of Rocks, 9 miles an hour. Harper's Ferry, 83, 7 miles per hour. Hancock, way up, 81 degrees, 7 miles per hour. Paw Paw, 81, 7 miles per hour. Mercersville, that's below Dam 4, okay? 81 degrees, 7 miles per hour. What's that tell you? That tells you that the entire watershed, okay, is basically the same in terms of aromatic temperature and wind. So, should it all fish the same? Will it all fish the same? No. Because those things don't really give you the true conditions of a river system. They give you your conditions. This is what you're going to be fishing in. Okay? In terms of, you're going to be dealing with the wind and the heat and the aromatic temperatures above the water. This is what's happening above the water. What's happening in the water? Well, let's take a look. Today, you're going to go out. You want to decide where to go. Am I going to go to am I going to fish the Piedmont section below Seneca Creek, Old Dam 2? 3.3 feet, okay? 4.61 KCFS. Let me start off by saying what we're talking about here, okay? Because I think it's important. I'm going to move this up to where I can pull that all that data information on the NOAA data to make it easier to like talk about it. Okay, so turbidity. Turbidity is the amount of suspended material in the water. That's really what it is. It's what? Think of it as cloudiness, right? Like it's what's in the water, the current flow. When you're talking about the current moving downriver. Okay, it's density, it's cloudiness, right? And the differences between low turbidity and high turbidity, okay? Low turbidity, okay? If you look at the gauge, and the gauge tells you, okay, Little Falls is at 3.3 feet, but its turbidity related to its KCFS, okay, in terms of the amount, right, that we're talking about, cubic feet per second, all right? And we can look at this. 1 CFS is 1 cubic foot of water passing a point every second. So 1, okay, CFS. KCFS is 1,000, okay? So if you see it, KCFS, that K means 1,000. So if it says 4.61, that's 4,000, okay, cubic feet per second, passing a certain point, okay? Edwards Ferry is at 4 feet. I always look at the gauges above and below Edwards Ferry because there really isn't really a real KCFS kind of publish like documentation. But Point of Rocks, 2.2 feet. 5 KCFS. Wait, Jay, you just said that Little Falls was 3.3 feet. And Point of Rocks is 2.2 feet. But Little Falls is KCFS is higher. That's right. Okay? So what's that tell you? Right? Harper's Ferry, 1.9 feet this morning. 3.55 KCFS. Okay? You ever been to Harper's Ferry? Look at the topography when you go across the bridge. You can check out the video I've got on YouTube. Going across Harper's Ferry, the bridge from Maryland into Virginia, Lovettsville area, but into Virginia, you can look at the topography we're talking about. Because that's a key factor. All right? Hancock. Further up. That's the upper Potomac. That's the true upper Potomac. 3.9 feet. 1.68 KCFS. Okay? Paw Paw. 4.8 feet. In Paw Paw, West Virginia. All the way up to Potomac. It's an awesome trip. You should do it. 1.33. So when you're looking at that, Hancock and Paw Paw are below 2,000, okay, in terms of running. They're running at 2 KCFS, okay? 2,000 cubic feet per second. The flow, the current, okay, the density of the water, okay, moving downriver, right? No anchor required. That's how you look at that. Okay, am I going to need an anchor today? Where am I going to go fish? I'm going to go fish at Point of Rocks. Okay, well, you might want to bring an anchor. Because based on this, it has the highest rate of cubic feet per second moving past a specific point. So if you're in a kayak without an anchor, you're going to get pushed downriver. You're going to continuing to paddle. If you launch at Point of Rocks, you ain't going up, okay, to lander, okay? And that, I mean, you're going up the gradient. That's why the turbidity at Point of Rocks is what it is the topography of Point of Rocks sits at the bottom of the gradient as the river comes from Brunswick to Lander and turns, it drops to Point of Rocks. That water gains momentum and pushes down through Point of Rocks. That's why you're getting that kind of elevated turbidity rate. And you need to know that if you're going to hit that section, okay, for any number of reasons. For safety reasons, for what you're going to take, which kayak are you going to bring, okay, what baits you're going to bring, rods, what your setup's going to be. You're going to know you're going to be dealing with a little bit more moving water, okay? That could be good or that could be bad. It really depends on what the conditions are. So you want to look at the NOAA data, NOAA. You simply do a Google search. You're coming to the Potomac River. You're getting up in the morning. Hey, honey, I'm going fishing. It's Saturday morning. First thing you should look at every time you go out, ladies and gentlemen, is your NOAA data. You need to look at your NOAA data for any alerts or any conditions or anything. So you would just type in on your phone, NOAA, Potomac River, Point of Rocks, Edwards Ferry, okay? Little Falls, Hancock, pick a town. Or just do NOAA, Potomac River, and some of them will drop up. And you just click on what are the conditions of the river today? Is it moving? Okay, then you want to look at the wind. Okay, what's the wind going to be like today? Okay, today I talked about it. It goes from 7 to 10 miles per hour. Okay, throughout the entire watershed that I covered. From Potomac all the way to Paw Paw. Okay, that's crazy distance. But the conditions are very, very similar. But the topography is very different. The slope and the gradients are very, very different. That's why you've got the different flow, your cubic feet per second. Okay, I'm going to do a specific masterclass video on turbidity. I will drop it on the channel. But as far as the Potomac River goes, when you look and you examine, let me talk to the tournament anglers for a second. Okay, you want to go back. This is what I do. Okay, for the science side. Okay, not tournament angling for me. Okay, that's not really my thing. Okay, I evaluate every tournament based on the conditions of which in my fishery, and I do it. Anglers call me all the time and they want the data, and I give them the data. Okay, so it helps them become better anglers. Okay, so what I do is a tournament happens on the Potomac River. what I do is I take all the people who participated. For example, there was just a tournament, and I got a bunch of calls that was right after this tournament because people were like, "What the heck is going on with the Potomac? Why have the catch rates dropped?" Sorry, morning coffee. And it's very simple. Because if you track the data, you understand. Last year in June 2025, okay, the same tournament series held an event on the Potomac River. Basically the same weekend, okay? Everybody's expectation going into this month was that this event was going to be a banger, okay? Why? Because last year on June 5th, okay, on June 5th, June 8th. On June 8th, last year, 27 anglers caught 186 fish. Okay? What does that equate to? Okay? If you're into metrics and analytics like me, and that's kind of what I do, it's kind of what I do for a living, okay, then 6.8, meaning 27 anglers on average caught 6.8 smallmouth. Okay? That's what that means. 186 divided by 27. It's kind of math. Okay? Now, you've got to look at, in June of last year, that event was won with 100 inches. Shane Crawford won that event with 100 inches. Local stick, local hammer. Okay? 100 inches. So the expectation was, okay, but again, when you analyze tournaments and you want to, and I'm speaking to recreational anglers now, when you look at tournaments and you see that information and that starts to ripple through the community and people, you've got to dismiss the top 3 people, okay? Not dismiss what they're catching, but you want to go through the whole field to understand, because not everybody fished the same place, right? So a guy could catch 100 inches or 95 inches. 1 or 2 guys could be in the right spots of the river in a 75-mile stretch. They could have been in the right creeks or the right spots. But then the rest of the field, they only caught like 40 inches or 50 inches or 60 inches. You still have to factor in their metrics, right? And so when you break it down, you take the top 10 of every event, and you get more of a scientific kind of perspective on, okay, but then you also got to remember, what were the conditions last year compared to this year? Okay. Now remember, 27 anglers fished in June 2025, 186 fish caught. Okay? On June 7th of this year, okay, 15 anglers fished, 63 fish were caught. 4.2 fish. 4.2 compared to 6.8. That's a big drop off in terms of how many fish were caught across the entire event field. And then when you look at the lengths, big drop off. 100 inches won, June of 2025, 9 inches less.